The text message lit up my nightstand at exactly 5:37 on a Wednesday morning. My cat shifted against my legs as I grabbed the phone in the dark. It was an automated alert from my bank. One sentence: "Your account access is temporarily suspended pending verification of recent authorization changes." I stared at the glowing screen. That account held my late grandfather's trust fund, $850,000. My pulse hammered against my ribs, but my breathing stayed perfectly level. My emergency room training kicked in instantly. Cold, clinical, triage mode. My family had finally crossed the line they had been inching toward for a decade. The silent tension was over. The real war had just begun. I sat up on the edge of the mattress, the hardwood floor freezing against my bare feet. I tapped the screen and opened the banking application. A red banner flashed across the top, demanding I contact the branch manager immediately. For a brief second, the image of my mother flashed in my mind. Her soft, perfectly styled hair, her gentle, concerned voice that always seemed to mask a razor blade. I knew exactly what she had done. But a tiny, foolish part of me needed to hear her say it. That was my first and only emotional mistake of the day. I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring. She was wide awake. My mother has never been awake before 7 o'clock in her entire life. She answered with my name. Her voice dripping with a sickly, weaponized sweetness. She did not ask why I was calling before dawn. She just launched right into the script she had clearly rehearsed. She told me she and my father had to step in. She used words like unstable and exhausted. She cited my grueling 12-hour hospital shifts as a charge nurse. She brought up a painful breakup I went through months ago. She twisted my exhaustion from saving lives into proof of a mental breakdown. My father's voice chimed in from the background, muffled but incredibly calm. He possessed that condescending tone he always used to make me feel small. He told me I was overreacting. He said they had filed a power of attorney and a doctor's note for my own protection. The betrayal was sickening. They were weaponizing my hard work against me. But then my mother dropped the ultimate justification, the words that killed whatever remaining love I had left for her. She told me my sister Vanessa has a real family, 2 beautiful children, and a heavy mortgage. She said I was just a single nurse who works too much. And I did not need that kind of money sitting around doing nothing. She claimed they were just doing what was right for the family. They were not trying to protect me. They were punishing me for being independent and rewarding my sister for conforming to their twisted dynamic. Toxic families do not attack your flaws. They attack your goodness. They take your exhaustion, your dedication, and your vulnerability, and they repackage it as instability to justify their control. I hung up the phone. I did not say goodbye. I did not argue. I did not scream. I swallowed the heavy lump in my throat, walked into the bathroom, and turned on the shower. The shivering stopped. The nurse took over. I drove straight to the bank in downtown Charlotte. The morning traffic crawled, giving my mind plenty of time to assemble the pieces. Vanessa's children attended a prestigious private school. She lived completely beyond her means. Driving luxury cars she leased using our parents as co-signers, she had mounting debts. And the trust fund was the perfect bailout. I parked my car, straightened my blazer, and walked through the glass doors of the bank exactly at 9 o'clock. I asked for the branch manager. A sharp, meticulous man named Marcus guided me into his glass-walled office. I laid out my identification and explained the situation. Marcus turned his monitor toward me. He showed me the scanned power of attorney and a psychiatric evaluation signed by a doctor I had never met in my life. The forgery was decent. They had clearly traced my signature from an old holiday card, but they missed one crucial detail. Whenever I sign my name, I add a unique stylistic hook on the letter H, a habit I picked up in middle school. The signature on the screen had a perfectly flat, standard H. Marcus looked at me, his expression grave. He explained the legal reality of the situation. Having the fake documents on file was suspicious, but to make an airtight, inescapable felony arrest today, the perpetrators had to physically present the paperwork themselves. They had to walk up to a teller and commit the crime of uttering a forged instrument on camera. It was a calculated felony orchestrated to fund my sister's lifestyle, and Marcus needed them to trigger the trap. The professional shift began. I skipped the emotional breakdown entirely. Marcus and I coordinated quietly with the local Charlotte police. 2 officers arrived through the back entrance and stationed themselves out of sight behind the teller counter. I knew my mother's psychology perfectly. Because I had hung up on her and refused to argue, she would panic. She would assume she was losing control of the narrative. She would come to the bank to forcefully solidify her power over the account. I took a seat inside Marcus's glass-walled office. I poured a cup of black coffee from the carafe on his desk. I sat perfectly still, completely visible to the main lobby, but protected behind the thick glass. I readied myself to observe the people who raised me destroy their own lives. I refused to play the hysterical victim they expected. I was going to be the silent witness to their ruin. At 10:15, the glass doors of the lobby slid open. My mother and father walked in confidently. My mother wore her best cream-colored sweater. She approached the teller counter with a look of profound sorrow. I watched her shoulders slump. I watched her pull a tissue from her purse. She wept to the teller, playing the tragic, heartbroken mother desperately trying to save her mentally unstable daughter. She slid the forged power of attorney across the marble counter. Following the protocol Marcus had quickly established, the teller looked at the document with deep sympathy. The teller slid a formal bank intake form back to my mother. The teller stated clearly that for a trust fund of this size, the bank required an affirming signature under penalty of perjury, swearing that the doctor's evaluation and notary seal were completely authentic. My mother offered a smug, arrogant smile. She picked up the pen and signed the form. By doing so, she actively committed bank fraud and perjury on camera. The crime was absolutely locked. The 2 police officers stepped out from the back room. They approached my parents from behind. My mother's tragic victim mask shattered instantly into entitled fury. She demanded to know what was happening. She raised her voice, screaming that this was her daughter's money and she had every right to manage it. The heavy metal handcuffs clicked around her wrists. My father tried to step back, his calm demeanor evaporating into sheer panic as the second officer secured his arms. As the police paraded them toward the front doors, my mother twisted her neck and locked eyes with me through the glass office wall. Her face was red, her mascara smeared, her mouth open in a scream I could barely hear through the soundproofing. I remained perfectly still. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I offered absolute, chilling silence. It was a devastating contrast to her dramatic screaming, panic. True power does not scream. It documents the abuse. It sets the boundary. And it sends you to prison. Marcus walked back into the office after the police cruisers drove away. He sat down and slid a new stack of paperwork across the desk. He personally secured my funds, transferring the $850,000 into a newly minted account. He set up a 3-factor verbal passcode. We used a specific quote my grandfather told me the day before he died. Marcus shook my hand firmly. He told me my grandfather would be immensely proud and that nobody would ever touch this money but me. But the war was not entirely over. My sister Vanessa realized the money was gone and that our parents were sitting in a holding cell. Out of pure, spiteful malice, she decided to retaliate. She wanted to destroy the career she so deeply resented. Vanessa used a cheap online electronic fax service to send the fake psychiatric hold to the state nursing board, demanding they revoke my medical license. She thought she was being clever by hiding behind a screen. She walked right into a federal trap. Days earlier, my hospital legal team had proactively placed a high-level fraud alert on my state medical license file. When Vanessa routed a fraudulent psychiatric record across state lines using that internet server, it triggered an automatic federal wire fraud flag. Furthermore, transmitting fake medical records to a government entity violated strict health information laws. The federal authorities stepped in immediately. When the federal agents arrived at Vanessa's sprawling suburban home, her husband answered the door. He had been completely oblivious to the depth of her crimes and the secret debts she had accumulated. When the agents laid out the extent of the forgery and the conspiracy, he was horrified. He packed his bags that same afternoon. He filed for divorce, took full physical custody of their 2 children, and moved out of the state to live with his parents. He severed all ties with her. The villains were utterly ruined, stripped of their freedom, their families, and their reputations. I was finally free. Years have passed since that morning in the glass office. I am sitting on the back porch of my home. The air is warm. The neighborhood is quiet. And the heavy, suffocating anxiety that plagued my entire life is completely gone. I want to look directly at anyone listening to this who feels drowning in family guilt. I want to break down exactly what happened. Because toxic families thrive in the shadows, and they rely on your silence to survive. The judge showed absolutely no mercy in the courtroom. He sentenced my mother to 6 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after 4 years. My father received a similar sentence. Vanessa faced the federal charges and lost everything. The court ordered restitution of over $142,000 to cover legal fees and damages. The church community they cared so much about completely ostracized them. They did not just lose their freedom. They lost the social masks they had worn for decades. A few months into her sentence, my mother tried to reach out. I received a letter from the correctional facility. The handwriting was shaky, but the tone was exactly the same. She tried to guilt trip me. She wrote that she was still my mother, that blood is thicker than water, and that she only ever wanted the best for our family. She demanded I visit her to make things right. I read the letter standing in my kitchen. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No sadness. No lingering hope. I dropped the letter directly into the trash can. I never replied. I let my silence be the final word. My life is incredibly peaceful now. My chosen family consists of my best friend from nursing school, a few brilliant colleagues, and people who treat me with genuine respect. We share dinners. We laugh without constantly monitoring each other's moods. And we protect each other. The contrast between this calm life and the chaotic, hypervigilant survival mode of my past is staggering. I learned 3 profound rules through this nightmare, and I want to share them with you. Rule number 1 is the rehearsal. People show you who they are in small, repeatable ways. A mother who belittles your accomplishments, steals your joy, and borrows money without returning it is simply practicing. Small boundary violations are rehearsals for massive betrayals. Pay attention to the practice runs. Rule number 2 is the weaponization of forgiveness. Society tells us we must forgive family to find peace. But forgiving an abuser without enforcing a strict boundary does not heal them. It just teaches them how to hit you harder next time without facing consequences. Forgiveness is internal. Access to your life is a privilege that must be earned. Rule number 3 is the spine of kindness. You can be a deeply compassionate person. You can be a healer, a dedicated worker, a loving partner, and a good daughter. And you can still call the police on the people who birthed you. Kindness without a spine is just compliance dressed up in a nicer outfit. Protecting yourself is not a betrayal, it is an act of profound self-respect. Abusers do not steal from you out of desperation. They steal from you out of a deep, pathological belief that they own you. They believe your success, your peace, and your money inherently belong to them because they view you as an extension of themselves, rather than an independent human being. So I ask you this. What boundaries are you terrified to set right now? What conversations are you avoiding because you are afraid of being labeled the bad guy in a narrative written by toxic people? Check your credit. Lock down your accounts. Protect your peace with everything you have. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you share a last name. Trust your gut. Save your receipts. And never apologize for surviving. Wow. Take a deep breath after that one. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there yelling, why didn't she block their numbers years ago? Why did she let them treat her like a walking ATM for a decade? Why did she even answer that phone call at 5 a.m? It is incredibly easy to judge from the outside. But let us break down the psychology of what is actually happening here. To understand why Natalie endured that silent tension for so long, you have to understand the slot machine effect. In psychology, it is called intermittent reinforcement. Toxic families do not treat you terribly 100% of the time. If they did, you would walk away immediately. Instead, they give you just enough crumbs of hope, a rare compliment, a peaceful holiday dinner, a fleeting moment where they actually act like a real supportive family. You keep pulling the lever, hoping for the jackpot of genuine love, while they quietly drain your emotional bank account. Natalie was not stupid, and she was not weak. She was conditioned by the people who raised her. But the moment that bank alert hit her phone, the machine broke, and she finally saw the scam for exactly what it was. Now, let us talk about the absolute masterclass in financial self-defense that she pulled off. First, look at her audit strategy. When she realized the money was locked, she did not call her mother back to scream, cry, or demand answers. Manipulators thrive in the chaos of verbal arguments because that is where they can gaslight you. Scammers hate details. Natalie went straight to the source, looked at the actual paperwork, and found the physical proof, the missing hook on her signature. Second, she practiced flawless trap setting. She understood the difference between a family argument and a legal strategy. Having a fake document is a problem, but tricking someone into signing a bank form under penalty of perjury on camera, that is a locked felony. She removed her emotions from the equation, sat behind the glass, and let her mother's arrogance do the heavy lifting. Finally, look at how she engaged in building the case. She did not wait to be a victim of her sister's retaliation. By preemptively flagging her medical license with the hospital's legal team, she built a defensive perimeter that instantly turned a petty revenge fax into a federal wire fraud indictment. The ultimate verdict here is simple. Your decency is not a liability, but it absolutely requires a security system. Financial boundaries are just emotional boundaries translated into math. If someone demands access to your money, your passwords, or your credit to prove that you love them, they do not love you. They are auditing you for weaknesses. Years have passed since that morning in Marcus's glass office, but I still remember one sound more clearly than anything else. The click of the handcuffs. Not because it made me happy. Not because I wanted revenge, but because, for the first time in my life, my family's abuse became real outside the walls of our house. It was no longer a private argument they could twist later. It was no longer my mother crying to strangers, telling them I was unstable, selfish, ungrateful, or confused. It was paperwork. It was video footage. It was a forged signature. It was a signed bank form under penalty of perjury. It was proof. And proof is the one language manipulators cannot cry their way out of. The courtroom was cold when the sentence came down. My mother sat there in a navy dress, still trying to look like the wounded parent. My father stared at the floor, pretending he had simply followed her lead. Vanessa sat behind them, pale and silent, finally understanding that my grandfather's trust fund was not a family emergency fund. It was not her bailout. It was not a reward for having children. A mortgage and a lifestyle she could not afford. It was mine. The judge did not soften his voice. He called the scheme deliberate, predatory, and financially motivated. My parents were sentenced. Vanessa lost everything she had tried to protect with my money. Her marriage collapsed. Her social circle vanished. The people who once believed her polished suburban image suddenly saw the debt, the lies, and the desperation underneath. But the strangest part was this. When it was over, I did not feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Because when you grow up in a family like that, the betrayal does not begin with the crime. The crime is only the final form. Long before they forged my name, they had already been practicing ownership over me in smaller ways. Every insult disguised as concern. Every loan they never repaid. Every guilt trip. Every time they told me I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too independent, too cold. They had spent years training me to doubt my right to say no. That is why I want anyone listening to understand this clearly. Toxic families rarely begin by stealing $850,000. They begin by stealing your boundaries one tiny piece at a time. They borrow money and make you feel cruel for asking when it will be returned. They insult your choices, then call it honesty. They use your exhaustion as evidence that you are weak. They turn your compassion into a leash. And when you finally resist, they act shocked that the person they conditioned has learned to stand upright. A few months into her sentence, my mother sent me a letter from prison. 4-page, beautiful handwriting, perfect grammar, the same performance she had been giving my entire life. She wrote that she was still my mother. She wrote that blood was thicker than water. She wrote that family should not destroy family. She wrote that I needed to visit her so we could heal. But not once did she write, "I am sorry." Not once did she admit that she forged my name. Not once did she acknowledge that she tried to have me declared mentally unfit so she could take my inheritance and hand it to Vanessa. That was when I finally understood the difference between guilt and grief. Guilt says, maybe I should fix this. Grief says, I finally see what this was. I threw the letter away. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply dropped it into the trash, washed my hands, and made coffee. That small, ordinary moment became my real ending. Not the arrest, not the sentence, not Vanessa's downfall. The ending was the day I stopped feeling responsible for people who had never felt responsible for me. My life now is quiet in a way I once thought was impossible. I still work long hospital shifts. I still come home tired. But the exhaustion is clean now. It belongs to the work, not to family chaos. My home is peaceful. My accounts are locked down. My chosen family is small, loyal, and real. We share dinners without hidden invoices. We laugh without watching for emotional landmines. Nobody asks me to prove love by surrendering access to my money. And that is what freedom feels like. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is waking up and realizing nobody is allowed to use your kindness as a backdoor into your life anymore. So if you are the responsible one, the successful one, the nurse, the worker, the fixer, the person everyone calls when their life falls apart, listen carefully. Being capable does not make you communal property. Being single does not mean your money matters less. Being forgiving does not mean you must stay available for the next betrayal. And being family does not give anyone legal, emotional, or financial ownership over you. Check your accounts. Freeze your credit if you need to. Change your passwords. Save screenshots. Keep copies of every strange document, every threatening message, every suspicious request. Do not let shame keep you quiet. Shame is the room where abusers hide the evidence. And most importantly, stop arguing with people who benefit from misunderstanding you. They know what they are doing. My father knew, Vanessa knew. They just believed I would rather protect the family image than protect myself. They were wrong. Maybe someone in your life is counting on that same silence from you. Maybe they think you are too loyal, too tired, too guilty, or too afraid to finally stand up. Maybe they have mistaken your kindness for weakness for so long that they forgot kindness can grow a spine. Let them learn. You are allowed to love people from a distance. You are allowed to forgive without reopening the door. You are allowed to call the police. Hire the lawyer. Lock the account. Block the number. And choose peace without one more apology. Because forgiveness does not mean handing the knife back to the person who stabbed you. If this story hit close to home, tell me in the comments, have you ever had to protect your money, your career, or your peace from someone who was supposed to love you? Subscribe for more stories about betrayal, boundaries, and the moment ordinary people finally take their power back. And remember, trust your gut. Save your receipts. Protect your peace. And never apologize for surviving. Have you ever had to set a hard financial boundary with someone you were supposed to trust? Tell me your story down in the comments. Make sure to hit subscribe for more deep dives into surviving the people who are supposed to protect you. And remember, your peace of mind is always worth the price of walking away.